Okay. So so today I'm going to read from the initial development page or section. This is page 189 if you're following along in the book. Um ta-da. If you're following along in the book and I actually haven't read this since I wrote the book. So and I remember liking writing it. So we'll see if that like, continues. It's been really interesting, like, as soon as I've come into this hub that, like, there's just been sort of, like, an immediate magnetization of matters of this theme and actually have it there's, like, kind of been a little bit of, like, stuckness with me even, verbally expressing myself, which has been a really interesting exploration. And, it's interesting because to me, the thing with Taylor Swift right now, that there's this kind of extraordinary level of attention and interest, um, and that, like, Swift like, I don't know. I don't even know if I can articulate this as well because this is kinda like the thing that's happening for me right now that it's just apparently gonna be something that I'm working through in this, I think there's something particularly interesting to me as, just, like, as an observer and a person and someone who has a growing appreciation of, like, her and the phenomenon that she is, which is someone who actually has an unapologetic, like, interest in herself, like, and I think that that's one of the things I remember watching her in an interview talk about herself, like, very unapologetically, like, just about, it's not even, like, a thing of necessarily, like, centering herself relative to others, but just herself, and speaking very comfortably in the knowledge that, that her inner life was interesting to other people, and, and I think that that is something that is really worthy of consideration for one's own practice here, because what we're trying to do is we are trying to establish that type of relationship of, like, cherishing and adoring and being interested and wanting to even, like, explore with, like, attention and precision to understand and express the feelings and the experiences that we're having, and I think that yeah. Yeah, I think it's really it's like the curiosity and the exploration and, as a result of that, really finding that, like, the ability to express these, like, the it this, her inner life and the experiences she has really unapologetically, you know, um in a really particularly interesting way. And also there's, like, a lot of other stuff that's, like, pretty extraordinary about, like, the way, it's interesting how she is assuming power over her career through almost like individual connections, and that her power is coming from the fact that she's connecting to something that lights people up. And as a result of that, because she's helping them understand their own feelings and articulate and see themselves more fully, that, like, love and allegiance to her has made her incredibly powerful to stay and, like, given her, the ability to stand up to some really intensely powerful organizations and structures and entities. So, I mean, that's also kind of a really fascinating, like, extraordinary thing to watch, and I think that yeah, I think that's all I'm gonna say on it. It's that actually kinda got and it's funny because her album just came out, or the re-release that she, made of Speak Now, which is also, I mean, it's like it really is, I really think what she's doing is she's just opening up she's she's opening up a new model and new permissions for how to operate as a woman in the world, and I think it's very it I mean, it's really extraordinary. Yeah, because I think the thing is like is that it's such an activation. So there's that for that. So I don't know. Apparently that's what I've said on that. So I'm going to read from the initial development and we'll see what comes up. So here we go. So initial development on the fifth hub. Um, so human babies are born with their larynx placed high in their mouth, similar to animals. This makes breathing and feeding easier. And anatomically, an infant's larynx gradually lowers into position, allowing for the sound production that makes human language uniquely possible. So, the initial high placement of the larynx is why babies' early speech is so muddled. Anthropologist Meredith F. Small writes in Our Babies, Ourselves How Biology and Culture Shape the Way We Parent, quote, what makes human speech different is that we are able to produce a range of noises with greater subtlety, and we have the cognitive ability to both hear and interpret those sounds. She also notes kids not only have to talk, they also have to listen and understand. And children learn to talk by listening. Before they can speak the word for it, a child can correctly point out a location on their body when asked. For example, before a child can say the word hand, they can show you their hand. So, I mean, I think it's just an interesting note that and I guess this really struck me while I was reading about the development of speech and language, that what we hear, and it shouldn't be that surprising, but it's noting that, to be able to speak, we need to hear first. So anything that we say has to be in some way a product of something that we have received, heard, seen, but heard in this case. So in the early months of life, nonverbal communication happens through emotional attunement, but when a baby begins to talk, its inner world begins to be revealed. The skills and ability for language and writing now grow throughout initial development of the hubs, or grow. So I'm going to reread that. The skills and ability for language and writing grow throughout initial development of the hubs, but at about age 7, there's an increase in logical thinking and progressively an emerging ability to write stories and to use advanced imagination that incorporates metaphors and symbols. Yeah. So how the family and surrounding social environment responds to children as they learn to express themselves impacts their developing communication and may result in adaptations of either a meek, shrinking, or overbearing, inflating communication style that carries into adulthood. Developmental biologists point out that early emotional attunement, the second hub, will affect communication style in adulthood. The mirroring and responsiveness of emotional attunement are found in the sophisticated verbal communication and creative expression of the fifth hub. The hallmark of second hub attunement is body language, which includes facial expressions that get blended into our communication style. In this chapter, I discuss how vocal tone, inflection, and body language play significant roles in how others receive and perceive our words. For example, I love the rain can mean that the speaker either does or does not love rain, depending on the tone, inflection, and body language that accompany it. Mhm. So during childhood, as we began the process of finding our voice and using words, we made mistakes. Being corrected after saying the wrong thing was how we learned about forbidden topics, stigmas, and what constitutes polite conversation. Kids say the darndest things when they communicate what they see, and how they learn to filter what they say is a process that can either interrupt and cause adaptations or can support healthy social sensitivities. Try to remember a time when you unknowingly spoke of a forbidden topic and how the adults around you responded. Were they angry? Were you confused and embarrassed? Or did you receive a patient explanation for why what you said wasn't appropriate? Or did you experience another option, such as being ignored and sensing that the adults in the room had grown uncomfortable? The fifth hub starts in primary school and transitions into our sixth hub for high school. Every year brings an increased ability to manage the paradox between belonging and individuality. Most children experience a considerable shift as they transition from middle school into high school. In the sixth hub, the child who enters high school will leave as a young adult. These hubs incorporate all the previous stages of childhood development as mature adult levels of consciousness begin to emerge. So, yeah. Yeah, all of this will be, we're going to revisit all of this as we keep going in this chapter. And, yeah. And it's interesting because it's like, that touches on a number of the themes that will get expanded upon as we keep going. And it's important to note that we're talking about expression, and in this hub, the development of how we're taught our expression is valued, validated, received, even what we're taught is potentially dangerous. And, this is a spoiler, but I kind of want to just feel like I want to bring it up right now, is that public speaking is in like many many like lists and like things where people are asked to sort of I don't know. For whatever reason, I'm missing the word on this, but it's like documented or whatever, where people will say that public speaking is their greatest fear. And so where it's like it'll be like public speaking and death kind of thing. So one of the things that we're going to explore a bit in here is it's like, how could something that is like relatively, like pretty like objectively benign as far as like speaking in front of people be so terrifying? And one thing that we'll explore is that for so many folks, out of the mouths of babes, like pointing things out and saying things that you see, like pointing out the secrets in a family, like noticing behaviors that are unspoken, asking questions just if you notice something, and saying that something doesn't look right or seems mean or standing up. It's that it's like the learning. You talk like we're talking about like directing really high voltage at a very like this is still a very young nervous system. So that, and like especially if it's coming up in a repressed culture, which is most have like so many rules and constraints for belonging and conditions for belonging and for like the safety of belonging, that to speak up and like just unknowingly address mores or address things that maybe like unresolved, or pointing things out that are insecurities of people, that the lashing back, if it's especially like with someone who isn't particularly conscious, that what's the experience of that's gonna be, pretty terrifying, is to become afraid, if you say something that gets you in trouble in school or embarrasses you or, gets you punished, where it was like and the thing is that it's arising spontaneously. So there's kind of like a notion of like, well, that just came up, so I can't really trust what comes up. So, you're talking about just starting to introduce like these aspects of just of like fear of speaking out. Because if you think of the first time that you got punished for saying something where you just observed something that nobody wanted to talk about or that was potentially socially embarrassing for somebody, and if that's lashed at, that is like the adaptation is going to be understandably like the notion that's like, whoa, when things are just naturally arising, I'm putting myself at risk, and that will be contextualized in probably in more of the factors and facets of the home. But anyway, so we're gonna like work through that, because part of what we'll find is, there's a lot of people have like neck tension, and when we start opening up this hub, it's actually like that, like you can find, it's not uncommon that there's like sort of like coughing and dryness and like stiff, like in this area, like in the jaw being tight, like the mouth always being closed, like like a lot of people exist with their jaws pretty much like shut, where like a relaxed, it shouldn't be clenched tight. The even ears and sinus issues, things that have to do with like tension in the neck. Um, and then even the practicality of the freedom of being able to let sound travel, to like sing. Like you can sing. Like you can sing. Like the thing about like you can sing. One of the techniques and exercises in here is to like, if you have a car and can drive, go to like a freeway and then like blast some music and like scream, sing along to it. um it's like moving sound out of your body, even like kind of things, where it's like, like if you're completing a stretch or a breath or something, where you just go and you start to find that there's like a natural expression that wants to arise, as in some of the techniques where I've done sort of like limited um expressions of them. The use of vocalization is sort of like like creating like the full extension of the action, where it's like that like, and even in the crying, that there's vocalization. So in that, like, this is one of those things, there's been so many, like, words and thoughts that have been suppressed, that, that this is what we work on here. And journaling, like, I talked about, and I think in the last reading, is journaling, but not journaling. Like, there's this thing where it's like, journaling that's self-conscious, and I'm just gonna talk about this again. It might be kind of boring. But there's journaling that's self-conscious, that's kind of like the idea of like writing correctly and in good sentences and completing thoughts like it's a composition. Like if, like it's like, you're kind of like you run out of like the kind of notion runs out of juice as you're writing, but you still feel like I have to finish the thing. It's like, this is journaling where you're like literally staying in the moment and watching what arises. And if whatever thing is coming up, and even mid sentence it's like done, you're like, okay, I get it. Like you just kind of keep going, and you just kind of start in the next paragraph, and then even writing in incomplete sentences, words, short phrases, whatever, just allowing it to rise and saying, tell me more, like what, tell me a bit more about this. I'd like to hear more about this. And just letting that explore itself with like the expectation that you're going to destroy it at the end. Like, this isn't about like looking back at the document and being able to like reread it like that, because this is like you're really trying to remove the notion of an audience seeing this, that it's like you're able to just clear, because it's like clearing. And this really important part of it, because when we're one of the things is like, so if we're journaling in the way where many people, it's like, oh, this is going to be, published after, posthumously, so, I need to seem literate. Like that actually creates like an internalized audience. And one of the things is we're doing this work to really deconstruct who we've taken in to imagine is watching us. Like we're actually really trying to like really come from the point of an internal experience originating from ourselves, and that this exercise being like we're releasing the audience, and it's just us in, like wherever we want to be, just like, wow, letting it out. It's letting out the stuckness. It's letting out whatever needs to be seen and heard in a way where it's just between like honestly, like between ourselves. And that happens in the moment of the actual processing it. It doesn't happen when the eyes come back with the valuation of it. So I keep emphasizing this, and I understand that that might seem like, why does she keep bringing this up? I keep bringing it up because I know there's such an inclination to feel like journaling is productive, and it's like creating something that's material. It's like filling the pages of a book or whatever. And this is actually more like brushing your teeth. It's not, you don't like put your, spittle into a cup and stick it into, a drawer or something. It's like it's kind, yeah, like it's, it's like, it's like cleaning. I got it. Yeah. I mean, it's a clearing. So, okay. I think that's it for today. There's also some, I will say in this particular hub, we do have some physical techniques and exercises that are kind of cool. I think they're in here. If they're not, I'll do them. We'll do them together anyway. I think this is kind of a short chapter too, all things considered. Because we're at page 190. This chapter is only like 25-ish pages, 24, 25 pages. So this, like, we're going to start to speed up a little bit, it's kind of funny. I've thought about it already, where the next chapter after is like a little bit longer, but I've just thought about it because, yeah, like I've just been like, what happens when this is done? And honestly, I think I'll just go back and read it again. And my hope is that there's just, would be that just that it evolves. And then even if this becomes more of a conversation as we're doing this together, or that other people do readings and we do them together, like the one I did a while back with Chad, it'd be kind of fun to do like split screens where it's a conversation with a person through this, like where, it's kind of like asking like their thoughts on it as it's arising. I'd love that. I would love that. So, or, like, or even something where it's more conversational as we're walking through it, because just because, for obvious reasons. So anyway, my squeaky voice, which is also kind of funny for this. Anyway, so that's it for today, I think. Next we'll get into the basics and the themes, and we're talking, it's one thing I will note here, and this is like, that part of this round seems to be, really remembering the production of this, just because it was, this is the first time I'm actually reading the book as a book, not as a file, and also reading it from the perspective of like revising it and trying to make sure it's going to, be really in great shape for you, the reader. So it's interesting, because I do think figuring out in these upcoming chapters, these had a challenge in terms of, like, figuring out what they like, how like, what made the cut and, like, what really stayed in and was essential for getting across what the hub really, like, needed to work with as a reconciliation. I wonder, over time whether that'll change. I think about this often as my own practice kind of, sort of is becoming what it is. I think yeah, I don't know. Actually, I'm not gonna say anything more than that. I'm not gonna say anything more than that, but I'm looking forward to reading this with you. And, always, I really welcome any comments or interactions with this, and also but just thank you for watching. No need to comment, no need to interact. But if you do, it's really much appreciated. I respond to every single comment, and, it's starting to be exciting because some of the videos are starting to get a lot of view, like, or relative, get these readings get a bunch of views, which is really fun to see. And, it really makes me happy because yeah, it makes me happy because I guess the intention that I'm transmitting in this, like, the sense of wanting and caring for folks to spend time in a space, like, in a space that's really emphasizing that there is nothing wrong with you. It's the biggest lie that's ever been told, is that there's something wrong with you, and to begin to work on this fissure just by spending time in the contemplation, in the work, building tools, doing this work. Um, yeah, it's nice. I think that one of the things, like, Mira had put a comment saying that the, techniques and exercises in the last chapter had, like, felt nice, and that's really, to me, one of the most buoyant and joyful things for me to hear. And I don't wanna be, like, prompting anyone for what to say by being like, "Here's the thing that's, like, preferred." But what I do wanna express is, like, why and how things matter to me, and one of the things that really matters to me um, is that this practice would support people in their process and in their liberation. So, sending you lots of love, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.